Hey everybody, Hans Harkey here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm joined with a very special guest, director, writer from Orlando, Florida, Rick Pamplin. He directed the movie Money Confidential and the movie Hoover with Ernest Borgnine. And he's directed several other projects as well. Rick, thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me, Hans. I really enjoy your show, and I'm very honored you'd invite me on.
Thank you. And all thanks to Scott DuPont for the introduction as well. Scott's also a filmmaker from Orlando, Florida. So, Rick, diving in, how did you get started in this industry of ours? What inspired you to become a filmmaker?
Well, I grew up in Michigan and love movies. I was very sick as a child. I spent a lot of time in hospitals. So I watched a lot of TV, couldn't play sports and go outside a lot, and didn't think I was going to live very long. So I lived in the fantasy world of, movies and television and the Beatles and, those kinds of things. And so my mother was a school teacher. My father was a postman. I had absolutely no connection to anything. And I dropped out of college and I got a job delivering newspapers for the Detroit Free Press. And I worked, I maneuvered my way into going to Detroit and getting a meeting with the film critic, Susan Stark at the Detroit Free Press. And I quizzed her about the movie business. And she said, you got to do something, do something, get started. So I'd gone to the theaters and I saw the original Heartbreak Kid and I loved it. And I wrote a review and I mailed it to a newspaper and they published it. And I called up the editor and I said, aren't I supposed to get paid for this? And she said, well, could you write some more of these reviews? And I said, sure. So I became the film critic for a weekly newspaper called the Grand Blanc Evening News, which was a suburb of Flint, Michigan, where I grew up. And then I became a reporter for that newspaper. And I started editing the entertainment section. Then they made me like a lead reporter. And then one of the stories I did was, I'm really just a journalist and a film critic. I interviewed a new TV station. CBS station was opening in Saginaw, Flint, Bay City, Midland, Michigan. It's a huge TV station. So I went up there and I spent a day at the TV station and they said, you ought to be on TV. I said, no, I don't want to be on TV. I'm a writer. And then they told me how much more money I'd make, So needless to say, I went to work for the CBS affiliate. I worked there for about 1.5 years. I worked in the old Walter Cronkite Evening News. I did leg work for Dan Rather when he came to Michigan. I did stuff. There was a morning show. It was called the CBS Morning News with Hugh Rudd. But I shot film. I edited film. I wrote copy. I put music in. I produced documentaries. I was on camera. And I had a deadline. Every day we had to produce, 30 minutes of live news twice a day. And it really was the greatest preparation for going to Hollywood ever. So eventually they fired me because I get fired from most of my jobs. And so I got a job at the University of Michigan, Flint, editing the student newspaper. But I got like a scholarship and they paid me a salary and I had an office. And so I made the paper a really good paper. We won a bunch of awards. My star writer was Michael Moore, by the way. And so right. Mike and I did this newspaper and it was a big success. And he had gone out to Hollywood and he called me and he said, you're not going to like it. It's all concrete and you're not going to like LA. So summer came around and I ignored Mike's advice and I went out to Hollywood and I fell in love with Hollywood. I loved it. And so I resigned as the editor of the newspaper and dropped out of college again for the second time. And then I ended up finishing up and getting a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in Hollywood. And I'm one of the few people, I have a master's in screenwriting, So I graduated and no one would read my scripts and no one would hire me. And I ended up living in my car and a grocery store in a parking lot of a grocery store in Santa Monica. And I did that for about 3 months, terrified, selling blood, doing whatever I could do to make a living. But I was determined to be in the movie business. I knew in my heart that I was going to be a filmmaker. So eventually, I'd go to all these free things where there'd be free refreshments. There'd be like the LA Free Clinic open house, or there'd be like, you could go to college and audit a class and they'd have free refreshments. So I went for the free food. So one night I went to a introduction to screenwriting class. The teacher didn't show up. They said, anybody ever sold anything? And anybody ever written anything? Anybody ever had an agent? So they take me out in the hall and I think, they're going to throw me out of the class. I'm not going to get any cookies tonight. I was really upset. So long story short, they hired me to write the screenwriting class. I wasn't homeless, but I needed a typewriter and a copy machine and a telephone. I didn't have all that. So I said to the school, I'll come in during the day and answer the phone, take messages and sign up students, because they had a lot of different classes. If I could use the typewriter and the Xerox machine, which was very expensive in those days, and the telephone. And they said, fine. And after a couple of days, a guy called up and said, hey, I want to hire a screenwriter. And I said, well, let me put you in touch with the screenwriting department. It's like, hello, this is Mr. Pamplin. I'm the head of the screenwriting department. And this guy flew in from Texas and hired me to write a script for a year. So, in basically a week, Hans, I went from being homeless, living in a Chevy Nova hatchback in Santa Monica in the parking lot of a grocery store, to living in a hotel suite that this guy had rented, writing a script and teaching screenwriting, and I never looked back.
Wow. That is
so
awesome.
That's how you get in the business. There's the secret.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, everything that you told me, you went through all these stepping stones, and to the point where you were living in your car, it just shows that you've got perseverance and you're not giving up. And a lot of people that come out here, they give it, 4 or 5 months and they're like, all right, I'm done. And they leave. And they might be missing out on the door that might open up for them like later on in another year or so. So that's an awesome testimony to not giving up and persevering, being out here. And it's a tough town. It's definitely getting tougher as the years go on. And then you reside now in Orlando. Is that right?
Actually, I live in Palm Beach.
On Palm Beach.
Yeah, I stayed in Hollywood. I had a lot of success. I sold scripts to Disney, Warner Brothers. I worked at Paramount. I was at Goober Peters for 5 years at Warner Brothers. I worked on a lot of great films. They did Rain Man, Batman. But I wasn't getting my films produced. I really wanted to be a director. And when you're a writer, writers in Hollywood create, they don't control. Mm-hmm. And one of my scripts was made called The Photographer, which was a wonderful, like kind of a low budget Hitchcock thriller. And they made a terrible movie of it called Dark Room. And they misspelled my name on the video box, and Universal released it. And I wanted control. And so I made a little low budget film in Los Angeles that did a 50-to-1 ROI, return on investment. And I thought, I can do this. If I can sell movies to the studios, and if I can make a low budget movie that makes that much money. So I had a family situation, and I needed to relocate my mother, who was ill at the time and had lost her husband, my stepfather, to Florida. And I had no interest in Florida. To me, it was like, it's like an elephant graveyard. You go there to die. I don't want to, it's too humid. I don't want to go to Florida. So I ended up relocating her, thinking I would go to New York and write plays, or go to Paris and, be an artist or whatever. And while I was in that process, I interviewed with Disney and I interviewed with Universal, who had just opened studios in Florida. And they both offered me deals, but I liked Universal. It was more of a real backlot, situation. So I set up shop in 1994 to 2008. I was at Universal Studios, and eventually they became more of a theme park. They do all kinds of Mardi Gras and Halloween Horror Nights, and and a lot of the business is still in LA and always will be. So they want us to leave our parking spots and leave at 3 p.m, which is noon in LA. And I'm like, this isn't really, I don't really want to be the theme park. I want to be, So I enjoyed it. I had a great time in Orlando. I made a lot of movies. I made the picture with Ernest Borgnine. I made pictures with Michael Winslow. I worked on Waterboy with Adam Sandler, which was quite an adventure. And I worked on a lot of films that came in to Universal Studios. And I'm a member of the Directors Guild. I'm very proud of that. So I was able to work with a lot of these crews and interface and work with my DGA colleagues. And so I loved all that. But the money wasn't really in Orlando. Orlando was kind of a theme park town. And the money was in Palm Beach. So I started coming to Palm Beach on the weekends, and I started staying in all these beautiful oceanfront condos and hanging out with all these people. And I got married in Palm Beach. You know, we went to the Breakers and did the whole thing. And, you know, they used to say to Willie Sutton, "Why do you rob banks?" He said, "Well, it's where the money is." So people say to me, "Why do you live in Palm Beach?" I'm like, we have the largest concentration of billionaires and millionaires in the world, and it's a great place to live. And we have a great film commissioner here, and we have a huge film office, and we have 28 cities. So we have like every different locale you can imagine, and we as a very film-friendly community. And when I was living in Orlando, for example, when you'd want to shoot something, you know, you're competing with the theme parks, you're competing with tourism, and it was, you know, it got to be problematic. When down here in Palm Beach, they're like, "Hey, let's go shoot a movie." You know, let's go. When I need something, like in Movie Money Confidential, which, by the way, Hans, is not that hard to say. Movie Money Confidential. Right. Movie Money Confidential. We got like a multi-million-dollar yacht for free. We got all kinds of permits for free, all this stuff. People in Palm Beach are very film friendly. One of the big secrets of making films, Florida is very film friendly, not expensive. And at times there are incentives and other times there aren't. But you're going to save so much money with world-class locations that I love Florida. So I've fallen in love with Florida. I especially love South Florida. We have enormous talent here. I think the average age of my crew in this last film was 29 years old. And the only experienced people on the crew that had made a movie were Scott DuPont, our mutual friend, who was a producer, my wife, Maggie, who had produced one film that I directed, and myself. And everybody else was a beginner. But we got such great talent. And we found this great composer who was a backup singer for Mark Anthony. And his name is Franklin Torres, and he lives in Miami. And he just did this beautiful score. And like, to me, I love working with artists and creating people. And one of the things when I was in Orlando, I did this picture with Ernest Borgnine called Hoover. And this is a decision that everybody has to make. We were Directors Guild, Screen Actors Guild, IATSE, and the crew was about 70 people. So when I wanted a lighting angle, I had to ask this guy to ask this guy. I mean, you know, in managing lunch hour and meal penalties, and, you know, it becomes a whole bunch of administrative stuff. And I like a smaller crew. I like to be much more agile, lightweight. I had worked with John Cassavetes when I was in LA. I worked on a picture called Opening Night. And John Cassavetes made a huge impression on me. And he would have a handheld 16 millimeter camera. You know, he'd be out in the street, no PAs, no permits. I mean, you know, and he would tell me stories about when he shot Rosemary's Baby with, you know, Roman Polanski in New York, and they never got any permits. And they'd go out during lunch hour and they'd steal all the shots. He and Mia Farrow walking around New York. So there's a part of me, I'm a guerrilla filmmaker. There's a part of me, even though I'm in the Directors Guild and I'll play by all their rules and I'll play by all of SAG's rules, I really don't like all of the other, you know, and then when you look at your budget, so much of it doesn't go on screen. Every time you hire a union person, it's like 35% pension, health, and welfare on top of a high salary. But then there's a whole other limitations. You can only shoot 8 hours a day. There's meal penalties. There's overtime penalties. And you know, you're losing, in my opinion, as an auteur, as a writer director, you're losing control. And I don't like that. And I like the movie Hoover, it worked out, but I didn't like working on the lot, the studio lot. There were so many elements that interfered. You know, when Mr. Borgnine, God bless him, he's no longer with us, but when he was at Universal Studios and he'd go to the bathroom, I'd have to send someone with him because everybody would run into, when he was standing at the urinal, trying to get him to read their script or let him pitch their movie. And, you know, it just becomes a whole, and then I had to put a security guard outside the door. Mr. Borgnine was 80 at the time, and he didn't like to eat lunch. He liked to take a nap. But I set up a green room, but I had to put like a security guard to keep people away from it. And, you know, again, as a filmmaker, we're getting all caught up in the hoopla and all the overhead and the expense. And where's the movie? So it was a great experience, but I really like on Movie Money Confidential, we shot 100% on location. And it's a documentary, but the idea was we wanted to pull the curtain back and empower people and teach people how to go get the money to make their own movie, whatever that movie is. And we wanted to tell the truth. We wanted to go to some dark places. We wanted to talk about being sued or being smeared on the internet. We wanted to talk about bad things that happen, but we also wanted to make an upbeat, inspiring movie. So the idea is, this is crazy, but you know, this is like my 49th year that I've been doing this. It just seems crazy to me. And I've learned a lot. I've experienced a lot. I've helped a lot of people. I help people sell scripts. I help people sell books. I help people sell their movies. I like to help other people. I believe in karma. I believe in helping people. And, you know, I was pretty much busted. I went through some very bad experiences that I didn't do anything wrong, and we don't need to get into it, but I was sidelined for about 5 years. I was eventually exonerated. And what happens is, and you know this, you're living in Hollywood, you're only as hot as your last project. You know, friendships are transient. People, you know, they're not true blue friends. They're only friends as long as you're, you know, sort of feeding the fame and money machine. And I got to a point where no one would call me back. And, you know, I had been sued 3 times and 9 counts against me. And eventually those suits were dismissed. I was exonerated. I didn't do anything wrong. But it takes 5 years and $50,000 to $100,000 to prove you're innocent to get through the legal system. And you can't go raise money, make movies. And as you know, it's a litigious business. People like to sue each other. And the more successful you are, the more they're going to sue you because they think there's money there. So it becomes, you know, you have to drop everything and kind of fight that and then whatever. So Scott DuPont was one of the great friends of my life. I called him up and he's been wrongly sued. He gets the game. And I said, I have to do a movie. I'm going to make a movie. And he said, what do you want to make a movie about? And I said, well, I'm in this book and I have this friend, Louise Levison, who's written, you know, 8 editions. She's working on the 9th of this book called Filmmakers and Financing. And I said, I want to go find, she did the Blair Witch Project. She worked Salma Hayek, Danny Glover, all of these people, big famous people in the movie business that don't even know how to raise money and have to come to someone like Louise to get help. It's hard. It's hard. So I said, you know, I'm just tired of all the nonsense. Let's just let it fly. Let's go interview lawyers and investors. Let's go interview movie stars. You know, we got Burt Reynolds' last interview in our movie, which is just unbelievable. We have Salma Hayek in the movie. We have Louise in the movie. And I said, I just want to let the chips fall wherever they may. Maybe nobody's interested in this. You know, maybe this is the last film I'll ever make. So we went out, we made the film over 5 weeks. We shot 100 hours of footage. It was very hard to get money people to talk to us. Film financiers, investors, they don't want to be on camera.
Yeah.
They don't, you know, they just don't. They don't want other filmmakers to come approach. Okay. So it was very hard, but we got the film. we cut the film down, and then of course the pandemic came. And then I was out on a cruise ship, because that's what you do in Florida. You go on cruises. And my wife and I both got COVID. And I got the really bad COVID at the beginning where you almost die. And for 6 weeks, I didn't go out of our condo. In fact, I didn't even leave the bedroom. We have like a big master bedroom and a bathroom. I mean, I could hardly eat. I could hardly breathe. And I, for 3 days, worked on my will. I thought I was over it. This is it. And so then to try to come out of COVID and sell our movie. Well, here's another thing, Hans. The whole distribution business has now been turned upside down. There's the consolidation of the old business models, the studios, Warner Brothers, HBO, Discovery coming together, Paramount, all of these consolidations, and all of these poor independent distributors, really in trouble. Independent theaters, art house theaters, people not going to the movies. So then I had to relearn, as I was doing it, the entire movie business and distribution business, which, by the way, is totally different now. It's all about digital downloads and streaming. That's where the money is for an independent filmmaker. The theater thing is still not settled out yet, and the old business models don't work. So we came out with the movie. Here's the happy ending for your audience, the story. As we sit here now, approaching our 8th week of distribution, which will be Monday night, we'll have been out for 8 weeks. We have 100% audience rating on Rotten Tomatoes. It's unbelievable, highest rating of my life. We have 86% of critics, unbelievable. We have a 9 out of 10 rating on IMDb, and we have a 5-star on Amazon Prime. Our distributor was able to sell our movie to 14 video on demand sites. 14. So we're in the UK and the United States. We're doing fabulous. The DVD is going to be coming out over the summer. We've sold 2 foreign countries. We've been invited to the New Zealand Film Festival. We're going to a film festival in Ireland. I think we're coming up to Orlando. I think we're going to do the Orlando International Film Festival. So this picture, which I wasn't sure we could ever get distributed, I didn't know anyone cared about, is the biggest hit film I've ever made. It's just crazy. and that's the thing. It took me all that time to work through the films I didn't want to make and the projects I didn't want to do, things that Hollywood made me do. My advice to your audience and to filmmakers: make exactly what the hell you want to make, the way you want to make it, and don't let anybody tell you anything, because that, in the end, you got to live with yourself. And I have the biggest success I've ever had in my life. Movie Money Confidential. You can go to moviemoney.com. Much easier to say, Hans. Moviemoney.com.
Yep.
And we'll have all the links right there for you that the film is on. In July, we're going to be on, I think, 6 or 8 streaming sites on top of everything else. The pictures just explain. I did a Zoom call with the distributor the other day, and we're with this wonderful company, KDMG, Casmarak Digital Media Group. And they're 6 years old. They've done about 300 movies. 2 of the key people were at Warner Brothers for years. And these people really love movies. And they have done a fabulous job. So it's just been unbelievable to come out of the pandemic, go through everything I went through, all the years in Hollywood, all the years at Universal Studios in Florida. And now I work out of my condo. I don't wear long pants. I, occasionally get my hair cut. I work with my wife, who I love, who produces, and people like Scott and all of these young kids that I, put together in this crew. And I've got a film commission that's very supportive. And I feel like I'm finally doing exactly what I want to do. So now I have to make peace with God to stay alive and stay as healthy as long as I can to get as many movies made. So I've already gotten my next film funded, and we signed the distribution contract 2 weeks ago. I start in May. Our distributor, and we are already in negotiations on 4 more feature films because this film has done so well. So
Cool.
Theoretically, I have 5 films booked. I've never in my life. So all of a sudden I'm going, honey, I got to start walking at the beach every day. I got to start exercising. I got to take care of myself because I don't want to miss out on this great opportunity. So sometimes it happens early in your career. Sometimes it happens later. If you can be in Hollywood and it happens for you, great. If you're in Orlando and it happens for you, great. If you're in Palm Beach, my message is this. When I worked in Hollywood, it was very racist, sexist, misogynistic. There couldn't be a female lead. Most of the antagonists, it's just a terrible thing that was done, was a young black male, or they'd say Russia is the villain. You have to go by their rules and their formulas. And there were 7 major studios. But the great news that I want to proclaim on your show today, Hans, all that's crumbling. There are new voices. There are new opportunities. People that are doing what you're doing with this show and putting this on YouTube. You're the future. TikTok is the future. You're the next generation of filmmakers I want to encourage, support, and watch. You guys are saying things, doing things, and getting information out there that I think is going to change the movie business. And I just want to say one thing. The way that I got in as a director was there was a thing called the video revolution. You used to watch a movie in a theater, and then it would come on one of 3, television stations, and that was it. Then they started cable, and then, now you might get a cable set. When they came up with home video, and they came up with all this new technology, the studios didn't want in on it initially. They sold movies for $80 in department stores. You could go buy Patton or Midnight Cowboy for $85, at the May Company or at some department store. And all these mom and pop video stores started. And so I was teaching and I met this guy and he said, I want you to make a direct-to-video film for me. And he said, I will distribute it. I'll give you a pre-distribution deal. So I made this little movie called Provoked that I mentioned at the beginning. And we made it for like 8 days, $100,000, no permits. The police came, they arrested my producing partner because I said I was just a student and I kind of escaped because we were shooting and we had an actress running with a gun, and the helicopter picked it up and the SWAT team came around us and we had to go to the court and everything, but we got out of it. But we ended up on the front page of the Los Angeles Times, but because, it's that first time director, Rick Pamplin, was shooting a police chase without permits and the police showed up. So my DP, Gaza Sinkovics, I said, see that helicopter, see the SWAT team?
Yeah.
We have one police car in the movie and the battery keeps dying. I said, turn around and shoot this. Shoot them arresting us. So if you ever see my film, there's helicopters and police and riot guns. I got all that for free because they came to arrest us. So we just filmed it. So, that to me, that's guerrilla filmmaking. That's what John Cassavetes would have done. Yeah. So I got in at that moment. We made the movie 8 days. We ended up spending about $130,000 by the time it was delivered. Picture did over $5 million back. We sold it to United Artists Pay-Per-View, one of the very first video on demands. We were on Showtime and we were in every blockbuster in America. And I got great reviews and it was a feminist diehard. It was the wife goes in with a machine gun to rescue the husband. And it just broke all the norms. It was like a feminist diehard. And the picture did extremely well. And everybody sued everybody. I got out of it. I said, you guys, fight over the money. I don't care. I want to go make other movies. But I got in. I slipped in as a director with that revolution. And I was thinking about you today. And I was thinking about this interview. And I was thinking the same revolution's here now. It's on YouTube. It's on TikTok. And it's the fact that you guys can make movies and build an audience. You have thousands of people that watch these podcasts. It's very impressive, Hans. Very impressive what you're doing. I salute you. And
Thank you.
I love watching. I'm going to be honest with you. I like watching YouTube podcasts and videos more than I like watching. I don't watch very much television. I'll watch Ozark and, Better Call Saul and things like that. But I don't watch much television. I watch television that looks like movies. But I'll watch podcast. I'll watch anybody's podcast. I'll watch, all these people out living in RVs, 2 million people, nomads, making these videos. I've become friends with these guys. I give them tips on how to, make their videos better. And I just love this whole thing. I love this whole thing that's happening. We've got 2 million Jack Kerouacs going around this country, living in vans and RVs with GoPros. To me, this is the greatest revolution in the history of cinema, because these guys and you and all the people like you, Hans, you're the future of this business. And I know how to make movies old school. I don't want to do that. I know how to make big budget, big crew. I worked on From Earth to Moon, which was shot in Orlando.
Tom Hanks.
The HBO, the Tom Hanks HBO's. And we had to go over to the Cape. We had to do a move from Orlando to the Cape. And 200 people were on the crew. 200 people had to have porta potties, transportation, lunch. Man, I don't know. To me, it's just that doesn't work for me. I want 10 guys. I want to go to a restaurant and put a couple tables together, and there's my crew, and we all break bread together. I don't want 200 people, most of whom I wouldn't even know their names. So, you have to kind of figure that out. But I think you guys, what you're on to, and whether you're a content provider, independent filmmaker, whatever you call yourself, you guys are the future, and this is the most exciting time. If I was starting off today, I would get a YouTube channel, and I would start making short movies, and I would do podcasts and short movies and start building my audience. So when you get a feature film, you've got a built-in audience, and that's what you guys are doing. You guys are the future. The old business models don't work. Now they're still going to do Spider-Man 19. That's fine, but that's going to have a 400. Mission Impossible, 30. Top Gun 7. Whatever. I mean, it's crazy. It'll be Tom Cruise riding on one of those, little kids, rides of a jet, putting quarters.
Yeah.
I mean, and there may be an audience for that, and God bless them if there is.
Yeah.
But I want to see new voices. I want to see original material. I want people that have been denied access to Hollywood, because it was a closed shop. It's not it's not an open shop. It's not fair. It doesn't have to do with talent. It has to do with your sexual orientation or the color of your skin or whatever it is. It doesn't.
Or how many followers you have on Instagram.
I'm sorry?
Or how many followers you have on Instagram.
Well, it's a bunch of fake stuff that they base it on. And I always want to make art. I want to be a great film. I want to be, Francis Coppola or John Cassavetes, or, I want to be a great filmmaker. I want to make movies that change people's lives and change the world and inspire people. Maybe I want to be corny like Frank Capra. But the point is that I felt restricted in Hollywood. I made a nice 6-figure income. I lived well. I bought a condo at the beach. I bought a house in the desert. I did all that crazy stuff. But that has nothing to do with cinema. And I just want to say, and I'm trying to be succinct, right now is the greatest opportunity you'll ever have to find your voice and to make movies and build your audience. And you don't need Hollywood to do it. You don't have to move to Hollywood. You don't have to play all those games. You don't have to create all that fake overhead. And you can kind of redefine it. And I am so excited when I talk to these nomads, when I talk to people like you on podcasts. People say to me, well, what really excites you? And I said, the future. I think that's great films are, by the way, I love Nomadland, which is very, very authentic. A lot of the people in that film are real nomads. Frances McDormand was Frances McDormand was the actress, but a lot of those people were true nomads. Some have died. Wow. Some of them are still around. I know one of them that had a very prominent part in the movie. And so to me, that was inspiring. That was just unbelievable. And it was a female director, and it broke every formula of Hollywood. It broke every rule. It won the Academy Award. It won all these awards. And I just love that picture. And you could have made it. I could have made it. That's what's exciting to me. And that's where I see the future.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be overly optimistic, but I just made a movie called Movie Money Confidential that's empowering people. And one of the people in our movie got so inspired, he went out, raised the money, and made his movie. And his name is Palmer Edward. Is it Edward or Edwards? I'm always Edward, Palmer Edward. His film, Palmer's film, is coming out in December. It's called Red Tide Massacre, and he's already got his next film funded. So in the process of making my movie, I inspired somebody else to go make a movie.
Yeah.
I want everybody that sees my movie to be inspired and realize I'm pulling for you. You can do it. It's possible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the message. And that's a message I want to carry for the rest of my life. And it's making my movie changed me, because I'm only going to make movies I want to make. And one of the films that I'm doing right now is a film I wanted to do when I was 17 years old. And I actually was in a prep school in Michigan, and I made a short version of it, and they flunked me. And it was about the starving children in Bangladesh. And the teacher said, well, that's not a movie. I said, well, this is something that concerns me. I think it is. George Harrison did the concert for Bangladesh with Bob Dylan and Eric Clapton, and we're trying to feed these children. And I went out to Hollywood, and people said, that's not a movie. You can't make it. So after I finished my movie and got COVID and almost died, I said, I have to be true to that 17-year-old kid that bought a ticket to go see a movie called The Concert for Bangladesh. So I actually started giving money away. The very first money I gave away, and this kills me, Hans, there's still starving children in Bangladesh today and all over the world. And George Harrison is no longer with us, but the George Harrison Fund is at UNICEF. So my wife and I started giving away $25 a day, every day for a year, for $10,000 to see if we could change the world. So I talked to one of my investors, and they said, oh, you're silly. That's not a movie. Nobody cares about those people. $25 doesn't do anything. Well, when you go into a country and the per capita income is $2,000 a year or $1,000 a year, $25 coupled with a whole bunch of other people. So we put in clean water in Africa. We put toilets in the Philippines because the children are bathing in the river water and they're getting sick and dying. We fed people. We planted crops. We're in 64 countries all over the world. And this morning I gave away $50 because 2 of my microloans came back. I do donations and microloans. And I reinvested them today to people that I'm helping close their loan so that we can help them. And one of the first women, or one of the first people that I gave a microloan to was a Vietnamese widow who had 2 teenage children, and her husband was a fisherman and he died of a heart attack. And I bought fishing nets and fish food, and I fought the Vietnam War. I protested, I marched in the streets. I hate war. I hate starvation, I hate war. So it seemed right to me to give this woman $25 that would trigger the loan. And about a few months later, we got a letter back that her 2 sons were now fishermen. They were successful because the fishing fed them, but also gave them a living, and they had bought a boat, all because of our $25 microloan coupled with these other microloans. So I get these letters from people, and I'm making a movie about this. I don't care if you give $25 a year, $25 a week, $25 a month, $25 a day. If you don't like the world, change it, because the governments aren't doing it's absurd. In this country, in this world, that any child starves to death. It's sick. Mm-hmm. These wars are sick. What we're doing with these endless wars. So you know what? I'm going to go make all the movies, Hans, that the film teachers flunked me and said I wasn't a filmmaker, because I don't care. So my wife and I started self-financing this movie, and we're in over $10,000. We don't care. I don't care. And if I have to put it on YouTube and give it away for free, and finance it myself, and that's like the same passion that drove me to live in my car that you talked about. And this is, if you want to be a filmmaker, It's a marathon. It's not a 100-yard dash. You got to be willing to hit your stride at age 67. You got to be willing to go through all of the processes of learning as an artist. You know, I had an agent that I got when I was getting my master's degree, and he died 2 or 3 years ago, Mike Hamilberg. And he was the greatest agent ever. And he sold Taxi Driver. He produced the Yakuza, the Robert Mitchum film with Sidney Pollack and Paul Schrader. And he was just the greatest agent. And he used to say to me, find your voice. Stop worrying about money. Stop worrying about success. Stop worrying about all this extraneous stuff. Find your voice. And I hope he's listening to your podcast today. I hope he's up there looking down, because I finally found my voice. But part of finding your voice, I can tell you this quick story. Marty Scorsese made this awful movie called Boxcar Bertha, which was about David Carradine and this Barbara Hershey and their hobos, and it was like a soft porn movie. They had like sex on camera and all this stuff. And Cassavetes went and saw it, and Marty Scorsese came up and said, "What do you think? What do you think?" And Cassavetes said, "If you ever make another movie like this, Marty, I'll never speak to you again." and I think it made Martin Scorsese go in the direction he needed to go in, to make Raging Bull, to make Taxi Driver, to make Casino, to make all of the great cinema that he's made. And I think we all need that collective kick in the rear to say, are you making films about your passion? Because if you care about money, if you care about all the crazy stuff, you're not a filmmaker. You're not an auteur. Francis Coppola, who I mentioned to you, I interviewed Francis. I later met him, but I interviewed him when I did my thesis, and I studied The Godfather. Here's a guy that made The Godfather, Godfather 2, The Conversation, which pre-told all of this eavesdropping and video surveillance that we all now live under, and Apocalypse Now, just to name a few films. Francis Coppola can't get funding for a movie today. Undeniably one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. Godfather considered to be the greatest film ever made, either tied with Citizen Kane or, first or second.
Yeah.
He's funding his own movie. This is why I love him. Here's a secret that John Cassavetes told me. John Cassavetes funded every one of his own movies. It was his money. He would mortgage his house, take out a loan. His movies were about $100,000. He would get all of his friends, Ben Gazzara, his wife, Jennifer, all these people to do these movies. Jenna Rollins. I'm like you today. I can't do names right. So anyway, but it is called Movie Money Confidential. Okay. Jenna Rollins, Ben Gazzara, Peter Bogdanovich. I worked with all these guys on opening night. Great guys. Peter Falk. But they'd all help John make a film. And he made all these great films that, by the way, they're on the Criterion Channel. There's like this great documentary about John called The Forge Ahead. And, his films are still living today. But he would go mortgage his house, make his movie, and no one could tell John what to do. They're all in distribution. In many ways, he's one of the most influential filmmakers ever. The Independent Spirit Awards give the Cassavetes Award every year. And I look at Cassavetes and Coppola, and I'm like, I want to follow that path. I loved Hollywood. It was a lot of fun. I loved being at Universal Studios. It was a lot of fun. But now I'm kind of serious. I'm really serious. My 2 rescue dogs have died. My son is happily married. He is successful, doesn't need me. He's much more successful than I am, in fact. So now I don't want to leave Earth until I make the movies I want to make and say what I want to say. And that's what I want to do. I want to change the world. And so if my body of work doesn't do some good to change the world, then I failed and there was no point being a filmmaker.
Yeah. Oh, that's a lot of information to take in. Very well said.
Thank you.
You that are watching out there, take it all in, take into consideration. And just, when I moved out here, I figured if the doors aren't going to open for me, I'm going to open them myself and create all my own opportunities. And that's what we're here for, So yeah, it was very well said.
Thank you.
Really appreciate
Well,
you coming out and chatting with me today.
I'm a fan and I'm a friend. And that's what you're going to build. That's the key.
Yep.
Build friends and find people that are like-minded and work with them, and be as aggressive as you want and stay true to your heart. That's my advice. And learn how to say movie money confidential. Go to moviemoney.com. Check out our film. I'd love to get feedback.
Absolutely. And the link to the film will be in the description below.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And if you're new to the channel, please subscribe, hit the notification button below for more interviews coming up. Rick, thank you again for coming out. And I hope the weather is beautiful in West Palm right now.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
And enjoy the week that you have coming up.
Thank you very much.
Cool. Yeah, thank you, Rick. I appreciate it. This is Hans Hernke signing out, and Rick Pamplin. Thank you again.